you okay? Okay. It's quite hard to follow a designer because my slides are not as good, I'm afraid. So, I deal with the words. So I'm going to talk to you tonight about content design. I'm a content designer at Deliveroo in their content design and research team. And I've only been there a month, but if anyone is interested, we are still recruiting for research, design and content there, so get in touch with me. I'm going to start with a quote. I'm not going to end with a quote, I'm going to start with one, just to be controversial. So I don't know if anyone is aware of Craig Sullivan. He's an analytics and optimization expert, and he says that most of their tests get their main uplift from optimizing words, button copy, headlines, text, layout, scannability, readability, comprehension and simplicity of text, which in itself is not a very comprehensible sentence, but I'll forgive him because he's not a content designer. So on your optimization teams and your design teams, you've probably got designers, you've probably got UX designers, you might have some analysts. Do you have content people? Who writes your content? So I'm going to talk to you about what content experts do and content designers do, and what they can bring, what value we can have. So what we do is we look at how best to create content to meet your user needs and achieve your business goals. And forgive me, Martin, but I probably have used that diagram in the past to show where we work, where user needs and business needs overlap. Because, as you said, there shouldn't be anything else happening. It should all be in that bit. But we look at structure, format, tone of voice, accessibility and message hierarchy. So we do overlap quite a lot with user experience, so when it comes to things like information architecture and format and structure, and that's why we work collaboratively with designers, so we can make sure that content and design are working together. So we work to a number of principles. First of all, context, and that's about understanding where somebody is in that journey. What have they seen before that has led them to this particular point, and what will they see next? And that's really important when it comes to user experience and consistency of messaging. We look at clarity. How clear is the messaging, and are we actually presenting it in a way that's as clear as possible? It might not be words, it can be a diagram, it could be an image. And what's the purpose? So what do we want the user to think, feel or do next? We think about flexibility because we all know that once we put something live, it's not just there to die a death, it's there to be optimised. So how easy is it to adapt? And can it be moved? Is it there and it can be flexible? So if the designs change, can the content change, vice versa? Is it simple? Is it simple to understand? Is it written in an accessible way? So can it be understood by the majority of people? And also, does it sound human? So are you talking to your user or your customer in a way that they understand in the language that they would use? And that's really important, being human, because it's really easy to see web content that just does not sound human at all. And especially as we get more into conversational design and voice UI and things like that, that human element is just so important. Generally, content that converts is clear, helpful, friendly, straightforward and engaging. Sounds pretty obvious. This is an example from a medical insurance company in the States, Oscar, and they just have a really nice, easy conversational quote journey, and it just builds as you enter the content. Still has help copy that just appears every so often, but it's just really simple, really straightforward. On the flip side, content that causes people to drop out is generally confusing, unclear, and it might even be aggressive or a bit snarky. And this example just shows how data capture form can quickly become a confusing mess, because by the time you've added in some help content, some marketing messages, and you've got a few kind of validation errors there, you can just see that it's a complete contrast to the previous journey, and it's just, it probably gives you a headache to look at. So there's certain, when we're working with digital teams, there's certain content that we can have more influence over than others. So we can't always influence at the top of the funnel, what the marketing messaging looks like, and how it's, attracting people to the site. And we can't always influence what comes after the point of purchase. But we can influence what happens at the consideration stage and at the purchase stage. So I'm going to think about those two sort of phases of the customer journey when I talk about content today, to just explain the different elements that sit within those journeys that we can improve through content design. Because that context is just really important. So when someone's considering what to buy, they might be curious about your brand, they might be doing a bit of research, they might be thinking about your product, is it right for me, I'm not quite sure, I'll just have a browse. And they might just stumble upon your site. So they're interested, but you still need to earn their trust and compel them to stay on your site. And this is where we can do a lot through content to help that. So first of all, your site structure. You've probably seen some pretty terrible websites in your time. They might have 2 different menus, they might have lots of different call to actions, they might have lots of different copy elements. You don't really know where to click first, you don't really know what it's trying to do, it's trying to do everything. It's just completely haphazard. And actually, what we want is something very simple with clear messages and that's really easy to navigate. And this is why information architecture is so important, and your navigation labels are so important. It needs to be scannable, we need to get someone to what they're looking for as quickly as possible, and we need to be really clear in our message hierarchy. What is the key thing that we want someone to do on this site? And so, for example, on this site, search for a flight or search for a holiday. All that other stuff is supplementary, it shouldn't be at the same level. So next we're going to talk about call to action labels, because this is a bit of a bugbear of mine, because there's no room for kind of cleverness or ambiguity in navigation labels. In fact, any UI copy. If I have to click through to see what's behind the label, then that's just a waste of my time. It should be self-explanatory. And I've just kind of mocked up this example of a coffee collective and put some typical sort of clever labels on there, puns if you will. So, coffee cup, what's that? Menu, I thought that was a menu, I'm not quite sure what that means. Collective, again, I don't know. And then there might be a weird question mark in the corner, which I assume is some kind of help, but I'm guessing and I shouldn't have to guess. Baristas, is that only for staff that work there? Or, I don't know, is that a recruitment site? I'm not really sure. So, this is a lot clearer. I can find a cafe, I can get rewards, I can work for them, or I can meet the different blends they use. I can get help. So it's task focused, it's clear, and it's compelling. And it still maintains a little bit of personality, so meet our blends, it's still got a bit of personality behind it, but it's a lot more descriptive, and I know what I'm going to get if I click through. The labels are really important, and in my previous company we changed the call to action label and saw a 71% uplift in click-throughs just from making it task focused, so don't underestimate your navigation labels. The next thing they might experience when they visit your site is a sign-up modal or something that offers them a discount. And this is where language can go so wrong. So sometimes they're really passive-aggressive. No, I don't like saving money. Sometimes they're unfriendly. Sometimes they just seem just completely desperate. Wait, don't go yet. And actually, as if it isn't annoying enough already when you get one of these, you've now got to feel shamed into doing something, not something else. So the Nielsen Norman Group did a really good video on these lately, and they coined them as manipulinks, which is quite a good term for them. It's just a needy way to make you feel bad and try and influence you to do something. So think about that language. Think about making it a bit more friendly and compelling. This is the same message, get 20% off if you sign up for your next order. But it's just simpler and it's more human. And by using a little bit of flattery, it actually makes the user feel compelled to do something and not guilty if they say no, it just says no thank you. So language is really important there. This should say purchase though. I just spotted a typo on my own slides, that's embarrassing. So let's assume that they loved your site and they're really excited and they want to go ahead and buy. And this is where a bad user experience can be really off-putting and dull their excitement, and actually we want to maintain that because they've made a decision that we want to maintain that and make it easy for them to, and reassure them that as they go through the journey it's easy and it's friendly. So the first thing you might encounter when you're completing your purchase information is an error message. These can really vary, and a lot of them are written by developers. No offence to developers, but they don't always think in human language. And sometimes these are the things that are really forgotten about when it comes to content design. And okay, you told me my payment hasn't gone through, but why? How? How do I fix that? And I know an error's occurred because now I'm in this awful loop where I'm going to keep making the same mistake over and over again because you haven't told me why. And this is going to leave me feeling really frustrated, and I'm probably going to leave the site. So these should be clear and directive and concise, but the most important thing is actually telling the user how to fix the problem. So please check you've entered the details correctly and try again. Okay, I put my card details in wrong. That gives me a hint that actually, I've made a mistake and I need to try it again. And it's just a lot clearer now what action I need to take to correct the issue. Password setup. So Tony talked about these earlier, and we've all seen these really complex rules for putting in a password. I'm not going to read all that to you because it's really boring, but it's really unhelpful and complicated. And of course, in an ideal world, we wouldn't need passwords, but we've all been victims of technical things we just can't get around, and systems and processes beyond our control. So when we do create passwords, think about how you can actually help the user and make it a lot more user-friendly. The worst thing about these types is they often just say incorrect format, and they don't even tell you what you've put in wrong. And I get infuriated by these, and they just put in really rude words as my password because I'm so angry. Make it helpful and make it clear and guide people. If you can do something visually where you change the colour as they do it or tick it, just design the content so it actually helps somebody and shows them what to do. And this is where this is an example of where content and design really sort of come into their own when they collaborate, because this is done by a content designer in conjunction with a designer who have come up with a really clever visual aid to help. There's a really good one on I think it's the driving licence renewal, where it tells you where to find your driving licence number, but instead of having sort of loads of text, it just has a diagram, so it avoids the need. So it's just a really clever content design technique that avoids the need for a load of copy that you have to read. Help copy. This is another really good one for content designers who love help copy. I've really noticed in usability testing that when you have show help or one of these sort of exclamation marks or question marks on the right hand side of a question, people rarely interact with them, and I think they just don't see them because they're so used to sort of just ignoring anything other than what they're focusing on, the task in hand, and you're sort of almost hidden as the help at that point. And sometimes help copy is quite patronising as well, and sometimes it's just generally not helpful. So this is actually an example of some real insurance quote questions and how they were displayed when we originally tested them with tiny show help. They didn't have exclamation marks actually, they had show help links. So the ideal scenario is that you don't need help because everything's so self-explanatory. But if you do need help, and you have one question or two questions per page, like the GDS approach, you don't need to hide the help, you can expose it, because the customer can only see one thing at a time or two things at a time, so it's not going to clutter the screen. They can be really content focused at this point, and you can just have that help text exposed. If you have multiple questions on a page, that wouldn't work because it just creates clutter and overwhelms the user with too much information. So in that instance, you can make it contextual. And actually, I found that people interact with these a lot more. So if you do need to have help links, make them contextual to the question and word them in a way that is how the user is thinking at that moment. So how often is your home left unattended? Why do you need this? Why do you ask this? Put that in the help link. people interact with them and actually read them a lot more. Do any accessible windows have locks? What does accessible mean? And that improved people's understanding of that so much more. We could have used a better word than accessible, but underwriters wouldn't let us, unfortunately. So we have to put some help text in there. But yeah, make sure your help text is actually helpful and appropriate, because quite often it's not. Upsell messages. Sorry, I'm going to talk about airlines again for a minute. They are often quite cagey and desperate, and so one of the things that holidays do, or cheap flights, or higher car bookings are the worst, is actually have an opt-out rather than an opt-in, and quite often present this after they've given you the total price. So they're almost hiding that they've included something and using double negatives. So it's just a mess, and it's really confusing, and it makes you distrust what you're buying, and it doesn't give you the assurance that you're buying the right thing at all. So a much more friendly and transparent way to do this is to ask the customer yes or no and have it as an active decision. Put the price clearly. This is how much it will cost you. You can make it more compelling, add our star treatment. That language makes it feel a bit special. Okay, I might do that. I might get some welcome drinks when I reach the departure lounge. That sounds quite nice. Yes, please, or no, thank you. There's no pressure. I'm not having to remove something from my basket. It's asking me whether I want to add it. So it's a lot more transparent. And as a customer, I'm going to trust this a lot more. So, a few quick tips for creating content, because you might not have content designers in your team, and if you haven't, you should have, but if you haven't, there are some tips. So, think about the context. What messages have your users already seen from your brand? Where have they been before? Have they come through from an email? Have they clicked through from an email? Map out that user journey, because your content needs to be consistent, but it just doesn't necessarily have to be repetitive. Where will they go to next? And what else is happening on this page? So I talked before about, for an example of help. If it was 1 or 2 questions per page, you can expose it. But if it wasn't, you don't want to blind that user with too much content. And so that earlier journey before that I showed was just cluttered with error messaging and marketing messaging and help copy. Just think about what else is going on in and around that particular bit of content. Because if you're asking someone to make multiple decisions on a page, interruptive messages make them lose their thread and stop focusing on that main task that you want them to be doing. You need to make sure they're really focused on that particular bit of content. Knowing what you really want your customer to think, feel or do is really important, because people don't really make rational decisions, they make emotional decisions. So how they feel is just as important as anything else. So how is your language making someone feel? Is it making them feel warm and fuzzy about you, or is it making them feel a bit cross and frustrated? What is the user or business need driving the content? And if there isn't a purpose for it or an objective, why are you creating it? It's really common, especially on websites, for different areas of the business to say, we need this content, we need that content, we need this content. Why? What's your objective for it? If you haven't got an objective, then you're not just wasting my time, but you're wasting a user's time, because if it's not based on a user need, then we don't need it. So really question people about the motive for content and what insight backs this up. If it's just content for content's sake and it's not based on any insight, then it's just clouding what you're trying to do, and it's just distracting someone from that one purpose that you're trying to get them towards. More information is not a good thing. It should be about less content, but better quality content. Tone of voice. This is really important. Some of us have brand guidelines and some of us don't. But it's not just about your brand tone of voice, it's about the scenario that someone's in. So you wouldn't be laughing and joking if you were telling someone some really bad news. So again, there's times when it is appropriate to use humour on a website, and there's times when it's really not appropriate. And in UI copy, it can be quite, you can, as a content person, you can get carried away with writing hilarious help messages or witty kind of sales messages. Actually, just don't, because you just need to step out of the way. And that kind of whole "don't make me think." If the more content you start putting in and having, it might sound hilarious, it might sound really witty, but if someone has to read it 2 or 3 times to get to the root of what you're trying to tell them, it's over the top and it's just going to get in the way. So think about what's appropriate to the situation. The best advice I can give for that is to vocalise your wording and think about how it would sound if you were talking to a friend, if you were having that conversation. And that's where conversational content design is really, really helpful in developing user journeys, because you can just think about, okay, if I was trying to extract this information from someone and I was just standing next to them, how would I ask them this question? And that helps you sound more human too, and not too formal. What if you don't have content designer? So there's a couple of books here that are really useful. If you are a UX designer but you are responsible for creating the content, I would suggest that you read these books. They're very good, just simple to read, just help you understand the importance of content design. And you can read my blog post too if you've got loads of time on your hands and struggle to sleep at night. And so, yeah, that's it. Thank you.